Welcome into the Illini Inquirer Podcast. And as most people had off during the weekend, as Bill Belichick likes to say, no days off when it comes to covering recruiting and football recruiting. Man, it felt like everybody in the country was recruiting over the weekend and getting commitments. And all of a sudden, Illinois adds 2 more commitments, but they do miss out on one potential headliner in the class of 2022. So we're going to focus on the football side today with Ryan Easterling. Tomorrow, we'll chat with Derek Piper about the latest basketball commitment, Sincere Harris. But Ryan Easterling, 2 new Illini commitments. I guess we're up to 13, so you can call it Bielema's Baker's dozen, I guess, at this point. But
you got the headline ready.
There you go. I didn't even have that ready, but it just came to my head.
These things just write themselves.
Right. So we got 13 commitments in the class of 2022 for Illinois, and we're really starting to check off some needs. We got actually a couple of defensive players now in this class, but 13 commitments by July 4th. That's a different kind of thing for Illinois. What's going to be a bigger class, but probably around 20 or so. So they had Matt Fries, offensive lineman out of New Jersey, and they had Jared Bate, who you and I think we all thought along that Illinois was the leader there. But those are 2 really solid 3-star gets at big positions of need in this class.
Yeah, especially Bate, because up until his commitment, they only had one other defensive commitment, and that was Malachi Hood. So to get a guy that they've long pursued, they've prioritized, and to close out on him was big. I think he has a lot of upside. He's probably going to need to add some weight, but he's got a frame that can do it, and he's got really good athleticism for his size. So for them to close out on that one, I thought that was really important. Obviously, offense they have a lot more commits on the offensive side of the ball right now, only 2 on defense. So, I think they're turning their attention there. And unfortunately, a couple guys over the last couple of days have chosen to go elsewhere, including the big one that you hinted at earlier. So,
yeah, we'll talk about some of those misses, but I do want to start with these 2 players. And let's start with Bate, since he is the in-state player. And I feel like he is an example, Ryan, of why in-state recruiting matters. Listen, he's not Austin Brown, who we're going to talk about, where Austin Brown had most of the top of the Big Ten recruiting him. And that was a huge win for Wisconsin. And I can't blame a safety for wanting to go play for Jim Leonard or for playing for that program that defensively has been great. As a program, they've been really good for a really long time. But Jared Bate had multiple Power 5 offers, a little bit of a tweener maybe for some teams, but for this Illinois defense, this new Illinois defense, it's going to be more of a 3-4 base. Yeah, they'll run some 4-man front at some point, but you're looking at more traditional 3-4 outside linebackers, guys who can drop into coverage and rush the passer. And Jared Bate at 6'5", 215 pounds, going to have to fill out, as you said, he's going to have to add strength. But he's got a really high ceiling at that position. But this is why in-state recruiting matters, because a bunch of his friends are coming here. Ian Pugh, he's known since grade school. Malachi Hood, he's known for a long time. He and Jordan Anderson are really starting to get to know each other these last couple of months. And all these guys, the pitch from Illinois was you can only play together at one spot. Why not make it here at Illinois? Why not all come together, turn this program around? And I don't know if they get Jared Bate without Pugh, without Malachi Hood, and you recruited them together and you recruited them together successfully.
Yeah. And I don't know that you're getting him under this last staff. I mean, one of the first times we got a chance to really talk to Bate after Brett Bielema came in, it seemed like Bate got a completely different vibe from this staff. He could sense that in-state recruiting was a priority and it mattered to them. And that difference, I think, really set the tone for that recruitment and got Illinois in a position early on, because they had some ground to make up, and it got Illinois in a position early on to take that lead spot in his recruitment and hold off some pretty good competition on the recruiting trail. Schools like Tennessee, Michigan State, Minnesota, they beat other Power 5 programs that wanted him. And so, for Illinois to come out ahead in that recruitment and to finally seal the deal there on July 4th, I think was big for them. He's coming with a lot of his friends. I think it helps build that camaraderie. It helps build that synergy that they're going to have and helps just build the presence in state when you're getting guys like Ian Pugh, Jared Bate, et cetera, Jordan Anderson, Malachi Hood.
Yeah. So I did a little bit of research, and Illinois has had one top 20 prospect the last 3 recruiting classes from the state of Illinois, and that was Keith Randolph. The last 4 recruiting classes, they have had 3. That's Karan Taylor, Jordan Slaughter, Keith Randolph. They have 3 of the top 20 already. And I'm glad to see that Jordan Anderson is in that top 20 because I think he should be. So you got Jordan Anderson, Ian Pugh, Jared Beatty. Even if it doesn't look like Ryan, unless they get a big flip later on in the process, they're not going to get a top 10 prospect, right? They weren't able to get Danny McGuire or Jacob Bostic or now Austin Brown, but there is progress. Maybe not as quick a turnaround progress as, say, getting an Io DeSumo for basketball, but this is real progress that you hope with a whole recruiting cycle. You hope next year with Caden Fegan, with Carnell Tate. I know he's not in state anymore, but he's a Chicago native. Malik Elzy, maybe some of those top 10 guys. Maybe you have more time. Maybe you have some wins on the football field, which, as you know, that is the biggest thing that is impeding Illinois for the most part in recruiting is they don't win enough games. And players want to go where they win games, get to the NFL, and Illinois hasn't done either of those things very well here recently. So if Brett Bielema can help, develop some NFL prospects, draft picks, and win some games this fall, plus you got a whole year of building a relationship, maybe they can cash in. But I've always thought that 10 to 30 range in state, that's where they can make a lot of hay, and it is. They got 7 of those guys, and they're still in the race for Aiden Lawfrey as well.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that's the thing is they haven't been able to put anything on the field yet. So it's kind of a double-edged sword because, right now they're still in that honeymoon phase where they can sell opportunities, sell, hey, it's going to be different. And then finally, when the rubber meets the road in the fall, they've got to show progress. And I think that's the thing is if what gets put on the field this fall looks promising and it's trending in the right direction, I think this thing really ticks up. But, if they stumble out of the gate and it doesn't look good, I think they're going to struggle a bit, and it's tough. So that's why I think this fall is really crucial in that regard. But, next year when we're sitting here at the same point for the 2023 class, you would expect that they would have, because they've had more time to interact and develop relationships with these guys, they'll be further along and they'll start winning more of these battles, provided that what's on the field is at least showing some sort of promise.
I have a comp, Ryan, for this. And this is why I think Jared Bates is a pretty good get. This guy was ranked a little bit higher. The offer list wasn't huge, though, for him. But I'm kind of thinking long edge rusher, kind of skinny waisted, though. Maybe a better fit as a 3-4 outside linebacker. But had a nice Illinois career. How about a Michael Buchanan comp for Jared Bates?
I think we went to the same place.
Yeah.
So they're very similar, a guy that probably looks like he could play basketball. And I think both of them did. Yeah. And they've got that same frame that kind of almost built like a lean tight end type frame, but they've got that length that's going to take them time to bulk up, and both have NFL potential, at least from a ceiling standpoint.
Yeah. So, all right. The next one, I think this one kind of went under the radar because he's not a state kid. Illinois was pursuing other offensive tackles. But again, I mean, this guy was on your recruiting board. And if he's like 3 on your offensive tackle list towards the end of this, I think this is pretty impressive to land Matt Fries. He's got good lineage here. His brother, Will Fries, was an all Big Ten offensive lineman at Penn State, got drafted by the Indianapolis Colts in the 7th round. But also you put on the film, Ryan, and that's a good offensive lineman, a kid who can play tackle, good feet, plays physical. But if this is the end of their offensive line class, I think it's a pretty solid, punctuation here to a pretty good offensive line class. That Hunter Whitenack, I'm pretty high on. Clayton Leonard, an in-state kid, and Joey Okla seems like a really good interior offensive lineman that fits what they want. So what do you think about Matt Fries?
Well, if that's the one, like the guy that you're falling back to, and that's no slight on him whatsoever, but if you're still getting a guy that has offers from Arizona State, Indiana, and several other Power 5 programs, like that's a good place to be. And looking at his film, there's a lot of good things on his film that I liked when I watched it. He's a really aggressive blocker. I think he's more in the mold of a run blocker than a pass blocker, but I think he does have some potential to pass block as well. But credit to them. They saw the situation, and bird in the hand is worth 2 in the bush, went out and closed it out. And man, they are doing work in New Jersey. they love them some New Jersey guys. So they got, Matt Fries and New Jersey guys.
Yeah.
So, I think he'll fit in well. There's obviously potential and opportunity at the left tackle position moving forward before too long too, because they're going to have Darian Lowe's gone after this year. Does Julian Pearl slide over and play there? So there's definitely early playing time available at that position if he can come in, get up to speed, and take the bull by the horns.
Yeah, and in that offensive tackle spot, I think they feel a lot better. At least where I thought they would have been, Ryan, because they have another year of Vidarian Lowe. Alex Palczewski's still coming back from injury, so it'll be very interesting to see when he's able to come back. But they are very confident in Julian Pearl. They loved what they saw, and I got to be surprised. Be honest, I was surprised with how good he was on the field. Like he was really competent last year. When to be honest with you, hearing from the staff a year ago that the former staff wasn't sure what they had yet, and then they get him on the field and he was impressive. But hear good things and you see good things out of Moses Okpala. Man, all bus team. I mean that looks like that doesn't look like an offensive lineman body. That looks like a WWE body. He's got on him, and he's still got some refinement to do, but he's a physical blocker, and Bart Miller seems to really like him. So maybe next year he's one of the guys. You know, Brody Wisecarver, is he an interior or an exterior guy? But they really wanted to tackle, and they feel like Matt Fries fits that. I do think if Ryan Baer called them up today, borderline 4-star prospect, and said, I want to come, they're taking him. If Patrick Kudus, who they're very high on, and Illinois made his top 4, they're the top 4 with Ryan Baer as well. If either of those guys call them, I think they take them. You said it, a bird in the bush, right? A bird in the hand is better than 2 in the bush. Like that's where they were here. Like, I don't think they could pass on a nice Power 5 prospect, solid Power 5 prospect like Fries.
Right. And, I feel a lot better about Illinois' future at right tackle than I do at left tackle, but between Okpala and Pearl, they both looked the part. But you still need depth. Like, that's the thing, is you still need depth. And Matt Fries is a guy that likely won't have to be thrust into action right away, has some time to develop. And then by the time that he's ready to take the field and get in the rotation, he's going to be pretty good. So, you've got that luxury of a year or two to get him ready, and then, slot him in, whether it's sophomore or junior year, slot him in there and let him go to work.
All right, Ryan, I think the headline for most people with Illinois football recruiting was who they didn't land. So when we come back, let's talk about the impact of a defensive back they missed on and a defensive lineman. We'll chat about that next in the Illini Inquirer podcast. All right, Ryan, Illinois really made this a battle, and I give them a lot of credit. And I know Illinois fans don't want to hear about, hey, we gave a good try on this, but I think for a prospect the caliber of Austin Brown, a top 6 prospect in the state, 4-star according to 24/7 Sports, and I think a kid who could have made an immediate impact if he needed to, and somebody who really could have been a linchpin of the defense. But I can't blame a safety and a really good defensive player for wanting to go play for Jim Leonard, who the NFL wants, but he seems to stay at Wisconsin, and he wants to stay at Wisconsin, played in the NFL, has developed a lot of really, really good players back there. So Austin Brown is off the board to Wisconsin, but I don't know if there's anything more Illinois could have done. They got him on campus for 2 visits to bookend last month. They made that big statement with that fishing trip down to Johnston City. They've made downstate such a priority. They just came up short on this one, but I don't think it's anything that Brett Bielema or his staff did wrong here.
No. And honestly, they had to battle their way back into it just to begin with. So, Wisconsin had been there a while, and Illinois just got a late start with, the coaching transition and everything. And, it took a little bit to start building that relationship when Bielema first got to town. But once they really got in there, I thought they put the pedal to the metal and did everything they could to try and get him. It just didn't work out in their favor in the end. Now, I don't see him flipping. I don't think he'll change his mind. I think he's pretty well set with Wisconsin. But I do think that this fall, as I mentioned, if they have an opportunity to show promise on the field and show what that defensive scheme can be, that, maybe they get the next Austin Brown. Mm-hmm. And that's where I think that they've really got to, put that in play is go out there and show what you have scheme wise, and just continue to follow the process. And eventually you will start landing guys like that.
Yeah. To me, I look at Caden Fegan out of Arthur, like a downstate kid. They got in first, right? They offered him. They've gotten him on campus. Now he's going everywhere. Rutgers is offered. He's gone to Notre Dame camps. And he is an impressive looking individual, about 6'3", 225, went to state in the long jump. Like he is a fantastic athlete, but they got in early. They've developed that relationship. And now can you show it on the field? Whether it's, your big running backs you want to use like Josh McCray, or your running game, or if it's, they want to put him at outside linebacker or something. What can you show on the field to get him excited to stay close to home? That's what I'll be looking for. But defensive back is an area, Ryan, where they're over right now. They haven't landed a defensive back yet, and they're in on a lot of good players like Jaden Mangum. It's a 4-star prospect. I know you talked about out in Michigan. It was a surprise they got him for an official visit. I'd still think that's a long shot for Illinois based on the crystal ball say West Virginia is the leader. Anthony Brown, Illinois made the final 5 for him. He's a top 500 prospect, would likely play safety. He took an unofficial to Illinois last month. He's making the decision later this month. I would say that's a little bit. The odds wouldn't say Illinois is a favorite there, but he did visit campus here, so we'll see what they can do there. And then they've offered a couple other guys, but they seem to have their priorities. And I wonder, Corey Lambert, who's a New Orleans DB, he was supposed to take an official visit, but then that didn't work out. And is he a guy that they'd like to bring here in the fall? So those be interesting because I think safety is now one of the biggest needs they have in this class. They do have Sidney Brown, Quan Martin, and Eddie Smith for multiple years of eligibility still, but that's a position, especially in a Ryan Walters former safety defense, I think is going to be really important for them.
Yeah, I think again that's a position where they really need to establish some depth, and they're going to need to get that in a hurry. They brought in several defensive backs in the last class, but there's really not among that group. There's really not an impact guy that's going to come in right away and just take over the defense and be that quarterback of the defense back there. I think they've got some guys that can be pretty good pretty quick. But
I like the corners. I like the corners Kinoto just brought in. Like I think Daniel Edwards has a chance to be pretty good. I know you and I are both very high on Tyler Strain. I think Keontae Curry is maybe one of those guys who can play in safety. Joriel Washington, I know some of that recruiting staff really, really likes more of a strong safety type, but there's some talent there. And I give Kinoto a lot of credit. I think that's where most of that talent in that kind of awkward class relies in that secondary. So I do think there will be some impact guys from there.
Yeah. It's just as far as immediate impact guys, they're going to step in and get on the field this year. They just don't have it. Eddie Smith might be that guy. You get a transfer from Alabama. There's a reason he wasn't seeing the field, and it's because he was playing behind a bunch of 5-stars. So, he can come in and gets a new opportunity and possibly be that guy, but they're going to need several bodies at the position just because they're now going to be throwing so many defensive backs on the field and playing this very aggressive kind of roaming, floating defense. They're just going to need a lot of guys to rotate in and out. So in the Big Ten's a physical league. They're going to have guys that can come up and hit too.
All right. Felix Hickson, the 3-star defensive lineman, a former Illinois assistant, just landed him. Congrats to Jimmy Lindsay in South Carolina for landing a guy who I think is going to be a really good nose tackle at the next level, just a big, really athletic kid. And that's another position, Ryan, where they got a bunch of defensive linemen they're in on, but I think they're more on the 5 technique guys like Sele Brown. I think I see more as kind of a 5 or a 3 technique. And they seem to be doing really well with him. Brian Allen, who's not now in Connecticut, but a Chicagoland native, they're in on him. But I just thought Felix Hickson was that guy you put in the middle of your defense at that nose tackle spot after Roderick Perry and Calvin Avery leave. That's a big need position. And I loved who they offered, Kenneth Grant, but then Michigan and Ohio State came in. There's not a lot of options outside of those guys. So that's probably a position that I think they might have to widen the net, because I think defensive line, you feel okay about with Ced McConnell, Johnny Newton, Keith Randolph, guys that are really young still, but have some high ceiling, but nose tackle after, Roderick Perry and Calvin Avery. I don't know. Is it Quentin McCoy? I don't know what you have there yet.
Yeah, and that's the other concern I have is defensive line recruiting is going to be, especially on the interiors, I think really needs to be the new priority. I don't think I'm really surprised that that Felix Hickson committed to South Carolina. I kind of saw that one coming. He showed a lot of interest in Illinois, had a good visit. It's just, it's the SEC. I think South Carolina did a really good job there. He connected well. I was kind of surprised he didn't end up going to Georgia Tech for a while, but it seemed like South Carolina really pulled away there at the end. But yeah, I mean, you mentioned it, like they are searching far and wide for nose tackles, but right now the menu is kind of short. A guy like Kenneth Grant, I mean, you could sell him almost immediate playing time after 1 year.
Love that offer when they made that. That's a big boy, but he moves incredibly well. So I'm not surprised.
His film is so fun to watch.
Yeah, Michigan and Ohio State came in. Yeah.
Yeah, the interesting thing there, though, is he's only ended up taking a couple visits, so he still has some visits left to go, and it doesn't seem like he's in a huge hurry to make a decision. So, maybe they circle back there. It'd be interesting to see how that one's progressed, and not a whole lot of news out of that camp. But, that's a guy that I would definitely go back to. And then, yeah, you said it, you're going to have to widen your net and start looking elsewhere, kick the tires and see what you can come up with and what shakes out. But that's going to be a position that they've got to get shored up. And most of the guys that are on the board right now really don't fit that spot. Like Salah Brown and guys like that are more the, 3-4 defensive end type guys. And I don't think you really want to put another 40, 50 pounds on guys like that just to have them play inside. I'd rather see those guys stick around the weight that they're comfortable playing at. Salah Brown looks great at about 260, 265 right now. And I think you try to keep him there if you can, if they end up landing him. But
yeah, kid who's rated a 4-star prospect, but he just doesn't seem to have that 4-star interest right now. Salah, and maybe that's because he might be a little bit of a tweener for people who run a 4-3, 4-man front. That's why I think Illinois in a 3-man that can make a little bit more sense, where you can kind of play your Jamal Woods role, where you're 280, 285. Yeah, that's great. Penetrate, hold an edge. You're not going to be asked to, be the pass rusher all the time, but I think that's a really good fit. That would be a really good get for Illinois, and he's going to be making the decision soon, because it feels like Louisville isn't pushing that hard. But this could be a big week ahead here, Ryan. We're waiting on Aiden Lawfrey to make a decision. Everyone thought all along it's been Illinois and Iowa. Iowa leads the crystal balls, and I won't dispute that. I've never felt like it's been a given for Illinois whatsoever. And, Illinois has always felt like Iowa would be really difficult to beat just because of their history of success with both running backs, or if he wants to play safety there, he certainly could fit there. And Micah Riley Ducker is all, I got to be honest with you. I didn't think Illinois had a chance at him when they hosted him for an official visit. They kind of opened the door, and now Iowa State's taking another tight end. Iowa doesn't seem very confident. And it seems like an Illinois-Auburn battle. And, Riley Ducker would be a third tight end in this class, but we know how important tight end is to this staff. And he is a very different tight end than Henry Boyer, is more of a jumbo guy, and Owen Anderson, who's kind of made the transition from wide receiver to more of kind of a hybrid tight end.
Yeah, and Riley Ducker is an interesting one to me because, Illinois has slowly but surely worked their way into that recruitment, because originally, he had that top 5 or top 6 or whatever, and Illinois ended up bumping another school out to get in there. And then it came around time for official visits, and he gives Illinois an official visit, and they do a great job with him. And he's kind of in that Luke Ford mold. I don't think he's quite what Luke Ford is, but he's pretty good. Mm-hmm. He's that 6'6", 225, looks like a basketball forward, can jump, a really good runner, strong guy. He plays with a little bit of a swagger too, but what we saw in the spring game is that the tight ends are going to get used. And in a multitude of different ways. They bring in Max Rosenthal as a fullback, as a grad transfer, probably like a jumbo H-back type. But then you've also got guys like Ford and Barker that are going to get to run some routes a little further downfield. So they're going to find a variety of ways to involve the tight end. And I would have to imagine that that's the sell to Riley Ducker, and the reason that he's listening and the reason he took a visit to Illinois.
Yeah, and Brett Bielema likes to sell that Hunter Henry is the highest paid tight end in the league. He does that as often as he can. I don't know about highest paid tight end, but he just got paid $40 million in the offseason. He likes to say that a lot. So I would too if I were him. And I don't want to fail to mention Sean Miller, the IMG Academy wide receiver, is making a decision soon. Illinois is in his top list, but they do have 3 wide receivers. We thought it would be a 3 wide receiver class, and after taking Ashton Hollins along with Ian Pugh and Hank Bate. But I do feel like if Sean Miller wanted to commit, I do feel like Illinois would take him and figure it out.
Yeah, and he's a slightly different type of receiver than any of the other guys they have. And that's the thing, is he's got a versatility that he's not too much like Hollins or Pugh, where, he's a guy that can run a lot of those really, really good intermediate routes. He's not necessarily a deep threat guy, but he can stretch the field. But he's a guy that's just a real good, run the middle of the field, find space in the zone, reliable hands, good overall athlete. And yeah, if he wanted to come, I guarantee they would take him, because he isn't just a duplicate of another guy they've already got in the class. He brings something unique to the class and would give them another weapon in the passing game.
All right, Ryan, I just want to kind of reset here. As we look at this class, as we've mentioned, the Baker's dozen that they have, number 38 in the country, number 11 in the Big Ten. They're kind of in this, the Big Ten West is interesting because it's got no top 25 classes, but I think 5 from 28 to 41. And then you have Iowa and Nebraska that will catch up once they add more quantity. So there's really no separation. Then when you compare it to the Big Ten East that has 4 top 12 classes, and I did the math, Ryan, the Big Ten East has 34 4- or 5-star commits in the class of 2022. Can you guess how many the Big Ten West has combined?
4 and 5-star?
Yes. 34 4- or 5 stars for the East. How many do you think the West has?
I'm going to guess 3 or 4.
5.
Mm.
And we wonder why the Big Ten East wins it's usually Ohio State, but Penn State and Michigan State have won it too.
Well, yeah, Ohio State is the number 1 class in the country, and they just added more guys. So
Penn State's number 3.
Yeah, Penn State's been on a heater this week. Yeah, Penn State's been on a heater this week. Ohio State they've added 4 and 5-star guys in the last 2 days. So, they're just absolutely smoking right now. Michigan will be interesting because they always recruit well, but we'll see how well it holds together if things get rocky this fall.
It's all relative, right? They do recruit well, but it's like Tennessee or in the SEC. Like Tennessee always recruits well, but you got to develop them and coach them well. And in Michigan, I don't think they're terrible coaches. It's just when you're competing against Ohio State and Penn State with what those coaches are doing, it's all relative. Like if Michigan were in the West, man, I think they'd have a couple conference championship appearances, right? But it's a different animal out there in the East, which is the good thing for Bielema. He has a chance here, but no top 700 prospects in this class yet, Ryan. But a lot of guys, I think half the class has multiple Power 5 offers here. What do you think of what Bret Bielema's done during his first 7 months with this class?
Well, I think one of the things that stands out to me is they went out and they got guys that are solid players. They didn't try to shoot for the moon and then miss and then have to scramble and just fill the class with a bunch of bodies at the end of the class. They were pretty strategic about how they wanted to build it. In typical Bret Bielema fashion, a lot of it's offensive line. He made sure that he got his offensive line taken care of. They got a quarterback that they like, and they got a bruising running back in Jordan Anderson that behind that offensive line that has that kind of smash mouth MO to it. I think they're starting to craft an identity in it to implement it. Everyone was wondering whether Bielema would try to implement bully ball, and I think they're going to still be very committed to running the football. I don't think that's ever going to change. That's just who Bret Bielema is. But I think with Tony Peterson, they're going to find a way to be a little bit more multiple, find those opportunities to throw out a play action, to get the defense biting. And I think what they've put together so far is pretty good. A lot tight end, offensive line, running back, and then a couple defensive players.
Yeah, I think defensive side of the football, they need to do a lot of work here. They got some targets still on the board. Maybe they want to evaluate a little bit more. And I do think offensively they're taking more guys in this class. And I do think partly because they want to start that identity and partly because they have so many returners, the super seniors on that side of the ball that they're going to lose here coming up. So offensively, I think they are forming that identity with big physical football players, right? That do fit that kind of Wisconsin, Arkansas style that Bielema has run before. The one thing is I think you're still looking for those elite level athletes. And I think that's why Ashton Holland's made a little bit of sense for them, right? Or Jared Bate makes a lot of sense for them. Those are great tools to work with. Like Ashton Holland's 4'4", 6'3", could get to 6'4" here. And can take the top off of defense, add strength to him, refine him as a football player. And maybe you do have a higher ceiling than a lot of, guys we've talked about that maybe are higher ranked. But this looks like a developmental program class, right? That we usually see at Northwestern, at even Purdue in recent years, outside of a couple of stars that they've gotten, Wisconsin, Iowa, right? A lot of times those classes are 30 to 45, and then they end up winning 7 to 9 to 10 games a year. So it seems to be the model. We'll see if Brett Bielema can make it work at Illinois, but with all classes, you got to wait 3 or 4 years to kind of see where they're at. But I think it's kind of what I expected, Ryan, maybe more heavy in-state than I expected. But Brett Bielema at Wisconsin never had a top 30 class. So I don't think I came in expecting him to get a top 30 class, especially at this program that has a not very good reputation nationally.
Yeah, I do think that the floor of this class is a lot higher. There's far less reaches, and the guys that aren't ranked that high, or maybe were unranked or didn't have a ton of offers, still makes sense for the ones they've taken. So,
like Jordan Anderson
target,
offer list made no sense to me. Just made no sense to me.
Well, fortunately for Illinois, they got in there before he had the season he had, and we've talked about this before, but if they play a full season and he goes out there and goes crazy and, maybe a 2,000 plus yard season, I think he gets a lot more other offers. So the other thing that's interesting too, is if you look at the in-state rankings with the priority they put on the state, of an overwhelming majority of the guys on that list are offensive players. It's just not a strong year defensively in state. You have a few stars, like you got Sebastian Cheeks, who, he looked at Illinois for a while and they got in there and they've got a connection, but just really probably got there too late. And then Austin Brown, and there's a couple other decent defensive players, but it's overwhelmingly offense this year in state. So I'm sure that probably plays a bit of a part as to why the class is so lopsided is between offense and defense. But, I do like what they've done. They've gotten guys that are reliable takes. They're reliable players. They went out and closed out. They didn't play slow ball or anything like that. And they're trying to get this done. And in a way too, it's kind of, let's get these recruits on board and then start moving forward, building this, rather than have a lot of uncertainty towards the end of the class and have to scramble.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what this month brings before training camp, Ryan, how many more pieces they can add on board, and then what the strategy is going into the fall, right? Because this has been a whirlwind of a summer now that they were able to recruit in person. But this fall, they can get back out on the road. They're limited, right? Because, they got their own season to worry about, and the kids have their own season to worry about. But you get another evaluation opportunity with not only the younger classes, but the senior class. And maybe you find some sleepers, or maybe you win some games and starting to get in some battles. Like maybe a Jaden Mangum takes his recruitment a little bit longer, or maybe somebody goes a little longer than we expect. And Illinois can make a splash there. So it'll be very interesting to see where they go after this. Before I let you go, Ryan, just want to get your thoughts. We had 6 transfers out. I'm not surprised there was attrition after a new head coach comes in. It just took a little longer, and I'm wondering where all of these guys end up. Not a lot of scholarships out there, scholarship spots out there at other schools, but Kyron Cumbie and James Frenchie are out. A bunch of offensive linemen are out that were very deep on the depth chart, and then Trayvon Riggins and Anthony Shipton as well. So what'd you think of that?
Well, the biggest loss from a depth standpoint is probably Shipton, just because they're so thin at nose tackle, but the rest of them kind of make sense. Especially like Frenchie and Cumbie, probably, they're not really blocking receivers. Frenchie, great playmaker, and Cumbie is fast as hell, but how do they fit in this new offensive scheme? And if they don't fit, they're probably going to look for an opportunity somewhere else. Offensive line, I think some of those guys,
especially the Isaiah Williams and Marquez Beeson moving to wide receiver, Isaiah's probably going to be a top option. Marquez, we'll see, but Isaiah's blocking some playing time for those guys too.
Yeah. Yeah. And as far as the offensive linemen go, it kind of makes sense. They're bringing in a decent sized offensive line class. They're guys that, look pretty good on film and could potentially be competition. And I think some guys just felt that it was best to take an opportunity elsewhere. The defensive line guys, that's depth lost, and that's not good. But at the same time, it doesn't really fit. You're changing your defensive front. And so maybe they don't feel like they fit scheme wise, and they're being asked to do something that isn't, really the best for, how they play or their style of play or their fit. So I get it. And, the other thing too, is it does relieve a little bit of the pressure as far as the roster number cap. So they've got some options now to possibly bring a guy or two in, and the transfer portal still works both ways. There may be some guys out there that they could bring in to try and fill some of those gaps that they have, if they feel like the recruiting cycle from a prep standpoint, the recruiting cycle is not giving them what they need. So.
Yeah, I think the guys that maybe surprised me based on what the last staff thought of them, and obviously it's a new staff, they think differently. Kyron Cumby, I thought, was a guy that can make an impact. It's just this offense, I agree, is not probably the best fit for him. And Blaise Sparks was a guy that was traveling last year. Like Illinois, the last staff thought he was the kind of future at right tackle after Palczewski and maybe Julian Pearl. And, this staff thinks a lot differently, but they like what they've seen out of Pearl and Moses Akpala, as we've talked about before. Like Frenchie's a high ranked player. I think he was really highly ranked early. Then he kind of stagnated. So I think that ranking stayed a little higher than maybe it should have been, but he's still a really good prospect. But again, yes, in this offense, is he as good of a fit? I wish all those guys well, and I'm interested to see where they all end up. All right, Ryan Easterling, that'll do it for Illini football recruiting. It'll be interesting to see where they go from here, but appreciate all the insight, my friend.
Thanks, man. We'll see how the week plays out.